Down there, life continues. The traffic is awful, stocks go on trading, and Star Trek is still showing.
Hello, grade 9 learners, and welcome to today's Natural Sciences lesson. My name is Sianda Madala, and this lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. Right, we have entered our term 4, and we're going to be exploring the knowledge area, planet Earth, and beyond. Right, that is the knowledge area that you're going to discuss for this term going forward. Right. And our topic for today is the spheres of the Earth. Our subtopic is the four spheres of the Earth system, right? So please take out your notebooks, write down some notes as we carry on with this lesson. So now, let's quickly look at our lesson objectives. Right, remember that this is what we need to achieve by the end of the lesson, right? So meaning you should also note it down, right? You should note it down and write what you need to know, to understand, to explain after this lesson is ended, right? So firstly, we should be able to explain that the earth can be understood as a complex system where all the parts that are called the spheres interact with one another, right? So write it down. You need to be able to explain that the earth can be understood as a complex system where all the parts which are called the spheres interact with each other. Also, you need to be in a position where you are able to discuss the four spheres that interact on or near the surface of the earth, right? That is all for your lesson objectives, right? Only two objectives. I hope you have noted them down. Firstly, we need to be able to explain that the earth can be understood as what? As a complex system, right? Where all the spheres interact with each other. Also, we need to be able to discuss these four spheres that interact on or near the surface of the earth, right? And all this information is found under the CAPS document on page 78. Right. So now let's move on to what we have done before as our pre-knowledge, right? That lays a foundation to today's topic. In grade 4, we started off by discussing planet Earth, right? We talked of planet Earth, and if you still remember, we said that planet Earth is the only planet that sustains life, right? Also, we talked about the Earth and the Sun. Then later on in grade 7, we talked about the relationship between the Earth and the Sun. Then we talked about the importance of the Sun for life on Earth, right? That is all in grade 7. Then later on in grade 8, we talked about the relationship between the Earth and other planets in our solar system, right? And as well as we have a picture here just to remind you of what? Of these lessons that we have discussed in the prior grades. So now, let's quickly look at our baseline activity where we are going to test our pre-knowledge now, right? So number 1 is saying, what is a system, right? What is a system in general? What is a system? Number 2, would life on Earth be possible without the air, the water, soil, and rocks? And please explain your answer, right? So I'm going to give you a quick 2 minutes to copy down and write the answers. Then after that, we shall meet for corrections. Welcome back, grade 9. Now, please remember, if you want to interact with us in terms of sending us your answers, questions, or any comments regarding this lesson, we still have our WhatsApp interactive number, which is 079-578-2908, right? So please do that as well after sending in, after marking this work, so that we can see your answers, right? So now, let's look at the solutions. Number one is saying, what is a system, right? So a system is simply what? A set of different things working together as part of a mechanism, right? As part of a mechanism or an interconnecting network, right? So it is a complex whole. So in simple words, a system is just different parts that are working together for a specific function. Right. Number two, would life on Earth be possible without the air, water, soil, and rocks, right? And explain your answer, right? So the answer is that no, right? Life would not be possible without the water, the air, and the soil and rocks, right? The answer is no, right? Then why? It is because they are all interdependent and they work together to sustain life, right? Which is what we're going to discuss further in this lesson as well, right? So I'm going to give you now a quick minute to copy down the corrections. Then after that, we shall continue with our lesson. Welcome back, grade 9. Now let's move on with our lesson. Right. Let's start off by highlighting some of the important terms that we are going to come across as we learn through this lesson, right? So now, the first one that we have is spheres of the earth, right? Which is our main topic. Spheres of the earth, right? So we define spheres of the earth as one of four interacting parts of the earth, right? It is one of four interacting parts of the earth, right? I like this part that says interacting, right? It is our key word here, right? One of four interacting parts of the earth. Then we have atmosphere, right? So atmosphere now is the sphere of the earth that is a layer of gases, right? It is the layer of gases around the earth, right? That is our atmosphere. So it is also what? Part of the spheres, right? It is an atmosphere, and this one is specifically for what? For being a layer of gases around Earth. Also, we have biosphere, which is one of the four spheres that we're going to talk about as well. So the biosphere now is the sphere of the Earth that consists of all living things, right? It consists of all living things and their interaction with the non-living things such as the rocks, the soil, air, and waters of the earth. Right? So biosphere has to do with what? It has to do with the living things together with their interactions with the non-living things such as the rocks, the soil, air, and waters of our earth. Right? Then now we have lithosphere. So lithosphere now is the sphere of the earth that consists of solid rock and soil, right? Consists of what? solid rock, and as well as soil, right? It is also what? A sphere of the earth that we're going to talk about today. Then we have hydrosphere. And hydrosphere is the sphere of the earth now that consists of water, right? Water in all its forms, right? When talking about water in all its forms, we're talking about its liquid state, gaseous state, and as well as solid state, right? So hydrosphere has to do with all the waters of the earth in all its forms, right? So now let's start with today's main meal, right? The four spheres of the earth system, right? So now, the earth can be understood as a system, right? Now let's underline this word here. System. What is a system? Let's remember our baseline activity. What is a system, right? So we said that a system is different parts that are working together for a specific function, right? So the earth as well now is a system, right? The earth as well is a system, meaning it has different parts that are working together for a specific function for earth to be able to sustain life. Are we together? Right. So all these parts, they are different from one another, but they are all interconnected and interact with each other, right? They have different structures, probably. They have different compositions, right? And they're different from one another, but they are all interconnected and depend on one another, and as well as they interact with each other, right? So let's look at this example to highlight what a system is, right? A bicycle, right? In order for us to be able to call it a bicycle, it needs to have the following components, right? It has some pedals, right? It has some chain to move the bicycle. It has some frame, some seat, right? For you to be able to sit and control the bicycle, right? As we are cycling now, it's starting to move as a system, right? All these parts now they are connected to one another. They are interconnected, and as well as they interact with one another. As you are cycling, what you are doing? You are pushing on the pedals, right? As you're pushing on the pedals, the chain is circulating and is able to spin the wheel at the back, right? It's able to spin the wheel at the back. As it is spinning the wheel at the back, it forms what? Motion, right? It brings about motion. Then you are able to move from point A to point B with your bicycle. So we say that this bicycle now is a system, right? It is a system because now it has different parts that are all working together for you to be able to move from point A to point B with your bicycle, right? And also in your movement, you're also able to brake and stop, right? It is all because of what? Of these different parts that are working together to provide mobility for you with your bicycle, right? So now let's look at another example that you are more familiar with now, right? You are there now in class, seated on your desk, right? Seated on your chair, right? And there's a desk in front of you, right? So this desk or table as well is a system. Why am I saying so now, right? Some of you are starting to think of what? Of the different parts in the desk, right? Yes, right? Because a system is made up of different parts that are working together, right? So this desk or table now is also a system, right? If you look at it, right, it has some piece of wood, right, that is nicely cut and painted for you, right? It's some piece of wood. It has some steel as a frame structure, and also it has some screws to join the wood and the steel together, right? So it is a system because it has different parts that are working together to be able to support you, to be able to put your books on top, to be able to put your arms on top, to be able to write on top of it as well, right? It is a system because it has different parts that are working together, right? So last more example now of a system before we get to these spheres of the earth as a system, right? Remember now in term one when we were discussing body systems, right? We're talking of body systems now, different parts of the human body that enable what? A certain system to work. and also the whole body as a system, right? So we have systems such as the skeletal system, which is made up of bones, right? Bones, cartilage, and so on, right? And tendons, so that we are able to have structure, to have shape, and also to be able to move, right? As it provides locomotion, right? We talked of the respiratory system as well, right? Talked of the skeletal system. We talked of the respiratory system as well. The respiratory system now, we say that it is the one that enables you to be able to carry out gaseous exchange, to be able to breathe in and out, right? Cellular respiration as well, right? It has parts such as the nose, our windpipes, the trachea, the bronchs, our lungs, the alveoli, and so on, right? Those are different parts that enable us to carry out such processes as what? Gaseous exchange, cellular respiration, and also the process of breathing in and out, right? Those are the different parts that form this particular system. The muscular system also, which is made up of muscles, right? Also to be able to give what? Protection, right? Also to be able to attach the bones and as well as to attach what? The skin on your skin to you, right? The circulatory system has to do with circulating blood. There's parts such as the heart, the veins, the arteries, and so on, right? Digestive system as well. It has different parts like your mouth, the teeth to grind food, the esophagus to be able to swallow, the stomach for further digestion, and so on, right? Then the nervous system also to be able to, for us to be able to detect stimulus and to be able to respond to that stimulus, right? For instance, when you're putting your hand on a hot plate stove, you're able to remove it quickly because of the nervous system, right? So now, all these systems again, right? They form a complete system, which is a human being, right? There are different parts again joined together for a specific function for us to be able to function as human beings. For example, I'm here talking to you now. Whereas I'm talking to you now, I'm breathing in and out at the same time, speaking at the same time, moving my hand at the same time using what? The skeletal system. Are we together? So what I'm trying to say is that a system is these different parts that are forming this complex whole, right? They are working together for a specific function. So now let's get to our main meal now. The Earth as a system, right? So when you think of planet Earth, as we said in the previous grade, it is the only planet that is able to sustain life, right? So how is life sustained in this planet, right? We depend on water, for example, right? Water for us to be able to keep hydrated, right? To cook with the water, to do some laundry, cleaning, and everything that we need with this water, right? Air for number two, right? Air for us to be able to breathe in oxygen, plants also to be able to absorb carbon dioxide from the air, right? We all depend on air. Land as well, right? Land where you and I are stepping on to now, right? Where our houses are built, right? Where also it is habitat for other animals, right? And life as a whole, right? Is part of what? Of the four spheres of the earth, right? But life can only exist when all the other three spheres are interacting. For instance, when you're talking about water, air, and land interacting, that's where we get what? Life, right? Because now we are able to plant our trees where? On the land, where they absorb water and where they get also air from the surrounding to be able to photosynthesize, right? So now, I'm going to highlight the names of these spheres using this picture here, right? So for our water now, right? All the waters of the earth in all its forms, whether it's liquid, solid, or what? Or gaseous, right? They form the hydrosphere, right? They form the hydrosphere. It is all the spheres that have to do with water, right? Then air. Air now is named what? The atmosphere. Remember, we said that the atmosphere is the layer of gases around Earth, right? It has to do with all the air around Earth, right? Then the land now is the lithosphere, right? Now, why litho? This word litho is taken from the Greek word for rocks, right? So it has to do with all the rocks and soils of the earth, right? Then we have life here, which is the biosphere, right? The biosphere, right? So now, let's discuss these one by one now. Right, let's move on with our lesson. As we said now, right, the parts of the earth that are interacting with one another for us to be able to sustain life, they are called spheres, right? So the parts of the earth system, they are called what? Spheres. And there are 4 spheres of the earth as a system, right? How many? They are 4, right? And we're going to discuss them one by one, right? As I've alluded in the previous slide, the water is our hydrosphere. The water in all its forms, solid, liquid, and gas, right? Then the air is our atmosphere, which encompasses of what? Of all the gases that are found in our or around Earth, right? Then the land being our solid rocks and soil of our Earth. Then life as a whole, which is our biosphere, right? So there are 4 spheres that we're going to discuss in this topic, right? So now let's look at this picture here and try to analyze what is happening here, right? So this picture here now, it represents all the 4 spheres that we are talking about here, right? And also I want you to look carefully. It represents all these spheres here, right? It shows some interaction as well, right? Some interaction and also dependency on what? From one sphere to another, right? Let's start off by the lithosphere. The lithosphere, we said that it's all the rocks and what? Soils of our earth, right? When you're looking at this portion here, it's all the solid rocks and soil of our earth, right? But when you look deeply into it, right, there's some interaction also with what? With the living organisms here, right? The living and the non-living as well, right? So here is a mouse. It is right where? Underground, right? It is habitat for the mouse here, right? It serves as habitat. So these rocks and soil, they serve as a habitat for this mouse right there, right? So we are interacting also with the non-living, which gives us out our biosphere that we're going to talk about as well, right? So look at this as well, also, right? This tree here, its roots are deep where? Within the soil, right? That's where they get their nutrients, right? That's where the water is absorbed and also the plant is able to photosynthesize, right? When you look at this plant again, this tree here, right? It is habitat also to other animals such as birds. But not only that, it is getting air from the atmosphere, right? It gets air from the atmosphere. It uses carbon dioxide to carry out the process of photosynthesis, where it makes its own food. Are we together? After photosynthesis has taken place, what is the product? Our oxygen, right? Oxygen and glucose, right? Our byproduct being what? Oxygen. This oxygen now is where now, look at this fox here, right? It's where now this fox benefits as well, right? It benefits from the tree as it gets what? Oxygen from the tree, right? And around the air. The tree got its what? It's carbon dioxide from what? From the atmosphere as well to carry out photosynthesis, right? So also now this fox here is dependent on the lithosphere for habitat, right? And also it depends on what? On the water to be able to get what? Hydration, to be able to get some drinking water as well, right? So the hydrosphere is not only there to supply water to this fox, right? Or any other living organism, but it is also a habitat for other organisms, right? When you look at this picture here, we have some fish, some octopus, and some plants within the water, right? And also this water now, look at this carefully. Also this water is on top of this ocean floor, which is made up of rocks and soil, right? It is made up of what? Rocks and soil. So now let's remember our definition of biosphere now. We said that the biosphere can only exist where the other three spheres are interacting, right? So when you look at this, we have looked at these examples. The hydrosphere interacts with the lithosphere in such a way, right? The lithosphere also with the atmosphere, right? So all these now they give us our biosphere, which is the interaction between living things and the non-living things, right? So here we have some living organisms such as fish, right, that are interacting with the water that is not living. We have organisms such as what? The mice inside the soil, right, underground. It is interacting with the non-living, right, which is the part of the lithosphere, right? So that's giving us what? Our biosphere. So now, I want us to quickly look at this activity now so that we can test how far we understand, right? So it says match the words in column A with the descriptions in column B, right? Where you have column A, you have hydrosphere, lithology, atmosphere, lithosphere, biology, hydrology, and biosphere, right? You simply have to match column A with column B, right? So since you have to draw a table as well, I'll give you 5 minutes to complete this activity. Then after that, we shall mark together. Welcome back, grade 9s. Please do not forget our WhatsApp interactive number. Should you want to send in your answers, questions, or any comments regarding this lesson, right? It is 079 So now let's look at the solutions together. Right. You simply had to match column A with column B, right? So for our column A, number 1, hydrosphere, right? So it corresponds to which one? In column B, it corresponds to what? To D, right? So hydrosphere is the part of the earth, sorry, it is part of the earth that consists of water in all its forms, right? That is the hydrosphere. It corresponds with D. It is the part of the earth that consists of water in all its forms. Then number 2, lithology, right? Lithology corresponds with F, right? F being the branch of geology that studies the origin, formation, mineral composition, and classification of rocks, right? That is F. Then number 3, atmosphere. Which one corresponds to it, right? The atmosphere corresponds to what? To to G, right? To G, which is the part of the earth that consists of a layer of gases around the earth's surface, right? That is our atmosphere. Then number 4, lithosphere, right? Number 4, lithosphere, that is our C, which is the part of the earth that consists of solid rock, stones, and soil. Then 5, biology, right? Number 5, biology corresponds with B, right? Which is the branch of science that studies life, including what living things need to survive, what makes life possible, how living things evolve and change, and how living things interact with one another, right? That is B. Then number 6, hydrology, right? Hydrology corresponds with E, right? Which is the branch of science that studies the distribution, quality, and movement of water on Earth. Then 7, biosphere, right? And that one corresponds with A, which is the part of the Earth that consists of all living things and their interactions with the rocks, soil, and water, right? So I'm going to give you a quick 2 minutes to copy down the corrections. Then after that, we shall continue with our lesson. Welcome back again, grade 9. We are still waiting for those answers, comments, or anything regarding this lesson on our WhatsApp number that is on the screen. Right. So now let's discuss these 4 spheres one by one, right? So now we're going to start off with the atmosphere, which is the layer of gases around the Earth, right? That is our atmosphere. It has to do with all the air that we get around what? The Earth, right? So now, the atmosphere now is simply composed of different gases, right? It is composed of different gases, right? It consists of about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen that you and I need to breathe in, right? Carbon dioxide that is less than 1%, and other gases, and also mostly argon, right? That is the composition of the atmosphere, right? Remember, we cannot live without the other sphere, right? Also, the atmosphere is important to us, right? Because that's where we get our oxygen, right? That's where the plants get their carbon dioxide to photosynthesize, right? That's where we get other gases as well that we need to sustain life, right? So now, also the atmosphere now is made up of different parts, right? That form this system, which is the atmosphere. It is made up of different layers, right? Layers to mention what? The troposphere that we get from 0 to 10 kilometers above the Earth's surface, right? Then as we increase with altitude again, from 10 kilometers to 30 kilometers, we find another layer, which is the stratosphere, right? Then from these 30 kilometers to 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, that's where we get layer number 3, which is the mesosphere, right? Then from 50 to 400 kilometers, that's where we get what? We get layer number 4, which is the thermosphere. Then from above 400 kilometers going all the way into space, that's where we find our 5th layer, our exosphere, right? So I'm trying to highlight to you that also these different parts that we are depending on, they have their own different parts that work together in order to be able to give us that one part of the system, right? So as we say here, the atmosphere also has its different layers, right? To name them, troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere that we're going to discuss further in the following lessons when we're talking about the atmosphere. Right. So as we said that the atmosphere is the layer of gases around us, right? So now the Earth also is surrounded by this blanket of gases, the atmosphere, right? And the mixture of these gases is held around the Earth by the force of gravity, right? So as we mentioned also in our previous term, when we were talking about the force of gravity, we said that the motion of all objects on Earth is governed by what? By gravity. Also now, this mixture of gases is held together in position by the force of gravity, right? It keeps everything in position. And the atmosphere is there now to serve as protection, right? Protection from what? The sun's UV rays, right? So it protects the Earth from the sun's harmful ultraviolet rays during the day, right? So during the day when there's insolation, right? The incoming of the sun's UV rays, there's some absorption of some of the rays in the layers of the atmosphere, right? To help reduce the heat, right? To help reduce what? The heat that is coming to us on the earth, right? And also those layers are responsible for trapping the heat at night, so that we do not lose too much heat as well and we stay warm, right? That is the function of the atmosphere in our system here. Right, now let's move on to the hydrosphere, right? The hydrosphere now is all the waters of the earth in all its forms, right? We're talking about the water coming in solid as ice, right? We have glaciers in some mountains, right? We have what? Liquid in our oceans and gas when our oceans evaporate, right? So they're also found underground in the air in the form of water vapor, right? So we're talking of all the waters of the earth now in all its form. So the earth as well has been called the blue planet, right? This is because of the presence of water on it, right? That's why it is called the blue planet, right? And all inhabitants on earth are directly, right? By inhabitants, we're talking about you and I and other living organisms, right? We are directly dependent or indirectly dependent on water, right? By directly dependent, we're talking of animals now that live in water. They need water to survive. They need water as habitat, right? Now, indirectly, that is you and I, right? We do not necessarily need to live in water to survive, but we need water for drinking, to keep us hydrated, to carry out certain metabolisms in our body, and as well as to clean and do whatever we need to do with the water to survive. Come together. Right. Then now we move on to the lithosphere. We said that the lithosphere now is all the solid rocks and soil of the land, right? Including the sea floor that we find where? In the oceans, right? So now we're talking of the crust and the uppermost mantle of the earth, right? So now we're talking about the lithosphere. This is where we find our lithosphere, right? The uppermost what? Mantle, right? This part, right? And this part here, right? This is the part we're talking about all the rocks and soil of the earth, right? The uppermost mantle and as well as the crust that you and I are stepping on right now. You and I, we have built our houses on the crust as well, right? So also the ocean now depends on the crust to stay where? In position, right? We have a crust that we call what? The ocean floor, right? Where we find also solid rocks and soil that accommodate water, right? Then we find what? Solid rocks and soil that you and I witness every day. Then also now we're talking of the biosphere. The biosphere, as we said also when we started, we said that it is all living plants and animals and their interactions with the rocks and soil and as well as air and water of the other three spheres, right? So talking of now what? Living organisms interacting with the non-living, which is the air, the water, the soil, and so on, right? And as well as rocks, right? So here is an example of a biosphere. As we said also before, the biosphere cannot exist without the interaction of the other three spheres, being the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere, right? When you have those three interacting with one another, they are able to give us the biosphere now, because it has to do also with the living things interacting with one another and as well as interacting with the non-living things, which are our air, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, our water, and as well as the lithosphere, right? Which is our rocks and soil, right? So looking at this picture as an example again here, we have some beds, some trees, some water, and soil, right? These beds are habitat for what? For these trees are habitat for these beds, right? The trees also, they are planted underground, right? They are planted on the soil. They depend on water also for photosynthesis and survival. These birds also depend on the water to get food, right? Such as fish and as well as to get some hydration, right? So all of these gives us our biosphere, right? It gives us our biosphere where we have now living things interacting with one another and also interacting with the non-living, right? So all, as we said as well, we said that all the spheres of the Earth system, they interact with each other. They are all interdependent on each other, right? As you can see now, the atmosphere is our air, the layer of gases around the Earth, the lithosphere being our rocks and soil, hydrosphere, all waters, whether it's liquid, solid, or gas, and also the main umbrella, the biosphere, right? where you have all the other three spheres interacting and also including what? Living organisms. Right. So let's look at some examples now of how these spheres interact with one another. Right. So the lithosphere and the hydrosphere, they interact when the water, right? We're talking about hydrosphere, all the waters, and lithosphere, all the solid rocks and soil, right? They interact when the water erodes the soil and carries it down to the sea where it settles on the floor and forms sedimentary rock. Then you have the atmosphere, which is the layer of gases, right? It interacts with the waters, our hydrosphere, when the water evaporates from the oceans, forming water vapor, which is a gas in the atmosphere. Also, another example here, the atmosphere being our gases interacting with the lithosphere, which is our solid rocks and soil, when the volcano erupts, right? Now, how does this happen? It happens when what? When shooting gases and dust into air during a volcano eruption, right? When shooting gases and dust into the air, right? So here is the air, volcanic activity, right? So as you can see, when this volcano erupts here, what happens? There's some gases that are being shot in the air, right? And dust also around the air in our atmosphere. Right. So the biosphere, as we said, that it can only exist when all the other three spheres are interacting with one another. So we're going to look at photosynthesis as an example of this interaction, right? So photosynthesis is a good example of how all these four spheres of the earth need to interact in order for the earth system to work properly as a whole, right? So just a reminder, photosynthesis is a process whereby plants use what? Carbon dioxide and water together with sunlight to make their own food, right? So plants form food in their leaves using light energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and water from their roots, right? To make their own food. Right. So here we have now our solid rocks and soil being our lithosphere, right? Then we have our gases such as the oxygen, carbon dioxide coming from the atmosphere, right? Then we have a plant, which is a living organism here to form what? This biosphere, because it's going to interact with the non-living, our air and as well as our solid rocks and soil, and our water as our hydrosphere, right? So what happens during photosynthesis now, right? The sun's UV rays are trapped, right? Or they are absorbed by the leaves, right? As they are absorbed by the leaves, the roots also suck in water into the plant, right? Together with the carbon dioxide, they are going to form the plant's food, right? Which is glucose. Then after the plant's food has been formed, we also get a byproduct, which is oxygen that is going to be taken out of the plant, right? The oxygen that you and I are going to breathe and breathe in as well in order to survive, right? So as you can see here, it is a whole biosphere now because we have what? A living organisms which is a human being and a plant interacting with one another and as well as interacting with the non-living surrounding here, which are the solid rocks and soil, our water, and the atmosphere. Right. So now let's move on to activity 2. It says write down the spheres of the earth involved in each of the interactions described below. Right? A. Caves form in limestone rock when the rock is dissolved by rainwater that has become a weak acid. B. Rainwater becomes a weak acid when it absorbs carbon dioxide from the air while falling through it. Then C. As caves form, large spaces develop underground. Then D. Water often flows as an underground river along the bottom of the cave. Then E. Different animals live in the cave as well as in lakes and rivers within it, right? Then F. Plants grow only in the light near the cave entrance, right? So now Simply write down the spheres of the Earth involved in each of the interactions described below. So I'm going to give you a brief 4 minutes to copy and complete this activity. Then after that, we're going to mark together. Now let's look at the solutions. Right. Number one, the spheres there that are interacting with one another is the lithosphere and the hydrosphere. Then B, it is the hydrosphere and the atmosphere. C, it is the lithosphere only. Then D, it is the lithosphere and the hydrosphere. E is our biosphere, right? Then F is the biosphere again, right? So I'm going to give you the last minute now to copy down corrections. Then after that, we're going to wrap up our lesson. Welcome back again, grade 9. Now we are going to move on to our WhatsApp section, but it seems like there's not been any interaction today on our WhatsApp line. So I take it that silence means consent, right? So now let's wrap up our lesson. Let's look at the summary of today's lesson. Today we're talking about the four spheres of the Earth system, right? And we said that these parts of the Earth system, they are called spheres, right? And also we discussed that there are four spheres that are interacting on our Earth, right? There are four spheres, right? And the four spheres interact on or near the surface of the Earth, right? The spheres are the atmosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere, right? The atmosphere being the layer of gases around the Earth, right? And also the lithosphere being all the solid rocks and soil, right, of our Earth. The hydrosphere being all the waters of our Earth, be it they are solid, liquid, or gaseous, right? And also the biosphere has having to do with all the living organisms and the interactions together with the non-living things such as the air, the water, and our solid rocks, right? And also, as we said, that the biosphere now, as I'll repeat now, is the interaction of all living plants and animals within their environment on the surface and below and above the Earth's surface. Atmosphere, just a reminder, a layer of gases around Earth. Lithosphere, all solid rocks and soil. Hydrosphere, all waters in solid, liquids, and gaseous state, right? And also we introduced the topic of photosynthesis to say that it is a good example of the interactions between living things and non-living things, right? Hence, the plant is able to get what? Carbon dioxide from the air, water from the hydrosphere, and also it is planted in the lithosphere, right, where it gets some nutrients as well to be able to carry out the process of photosynthesis, right? So let's meet again in the next lesson when we're talking about the lithosphere and the rock cycle, right? So go home, open this topic, right? Make sure you write down some notes so that when we come back here, it's an easy teaching and learning process, right? So from me to you now, thank you and goodbye.